All right, and this week we're going to be interviewing Bob Pockrass. Bob is a reporter for Fox Sports. But before we get to the interview, I want to give a quick shout out to our great sponsor. Today's interview is sponsored by Peak Auto. Save $7 on Peak 10X antifreeze and coolant from September 22nd to November 30th. Get your rebate today at peakauto.com. Bob, great to have you. How's your week been so far? De-stressing from Talladega.
Yeah, it's been good. It's been good. I was joking with some people that if there was a headline for Talladega, for most people it'd be Talladega bites, right? Because it seemed to bite a lot of people, especially a lot of the playoff drivers.
For sure. Now, I just want to go ahead and jump straight to the chase. I know that everyone that follows you knows that you've got the pulse on the silly season news and everything that's been going around. But talking about you and hearing about your employment history, I know back a couple years ago, ESPN ended up leaving ESPN. You had like a little Bob Pockrass style silly season there. Could you talk a little bit about getting in with Fox Sports, and did you have any other type of options, or how was it feeling having your own type of silly season?
Well, it's never comfortable, right? But I think if you're in the journalism world, you're always most of the time you're in silly season, except in the few lucky spots like when you had at ESPN when you actually have a contract. So, the contract ended, and they weren't going to keep having a motorsports writer, and it's it was great to have a lot of talks with a lot of people about potentially what I could do both in racing and some outside of racing, and it's just great that Fox I think saw value in what I do on social and what and the info I could provide. So Fox is all about especially you got all the race broadcasts, you got the race hub, all these shows, and they and I was able to add something I think to them, just having somebody who's talking to people all the time. The pit reporters are certainly busy on certain things that they're focused on, but maybe they're not talking to as many people all day, every day like I am, because of the nature of the work that I'm doing. And so I just was able to come in and be a resource for everybody, and so much as I tweet and everything like that, I'm, also, texting people, texting other Fox reporters, and, we're talking about what we're hearing, and we're able to, I'm just able to be a good resource for them.
So I've heard from many people. I'm an aspiring journalist. I currently write for Speedway Digest. And from people who work in the media, I've heard how dedicated you are to the sport. You're always one of the first people in the garage area. So first off, I want to thanks for your dedication, for providing the latest news and everything in the media center, and always being the first one there. But we had a wild weekend at Talladega this week. Double yellow line rule has been a big talk. What's your take on the double yellow line rule? Do we keep it? Do we lose it? What's going on?
I don't really like it, but I can't say I have a great alternative for it. I would almost say at the last two laps and in green, white checkered to maybe throw it away and not have it. I know some people say, well, you can't have some rules for the start and for the finish, but the rules change in football a little bit right after the 2-minute warning, or in the last minute of a game. And I think potentially you could do that here. The argument is that they'd wreck, and the fact is that they're wrecking anyway, right? So I guess the question is, we just don't know how bad the wrecks are, and this rule was made 20 years ago, so it's really hard to predict how bad those wrecks would be if this rule was, just eliminated for the last few laps. I kind of would like to see it, maybe test it in some of the other series first, and if it goes well, potentially use that for Cup. Now, I don't think NASCAR is going to go that way, and I think NASCAR's in a tough spot because they're sitting there trying to make judgment calls. And, look, I think they at least you can say on Sundays that they set the precedent early with Joey Logano, and they kind of kept that through the race. Now, if you had asked me after the race if they made no penalties at all, if they just said, hey, it's last lap, maybe Denny Hamlin was trying to get away from a crash. Chase Elliott was trying to avoid a crash. We don't feel that anybody theoretically forced anybody down. It was just contact that was going to happen. I probably would have been okay with that too. I would have been, if NASCAR had swallowed the whistle, I probably wouldn't have had a big beef with it. I didn't really have a big beef with with the penalties that they gave though as well. It's just such a, to me, it's just such a tough thing to do. I will say that I think that it needs to be blatant for them to call. And so when they make a decision like on Chase Elliott and saying, hey, he went below, and they penalize him, and then they go back and review it and say no, well, then it obviously, to me, should never have been a penalty anyway because it wasn't blatant enough.
For sure. Steve Letarte said on a show earlier today that maybe adding rumble strips down there so it's not as – you can't get an advantage if you do go down there. What do you think about that?
I don't like rumble strips at 190 miles an hour. I mean, I just don't. The wrecks are too violent, and cars are always spinning. I would not feel good about having rumble strips. Letarte might be able to figure out a way that they could be done so that they don't make a hazard if you wreck. But I just don't see it.
Mm-hmm.
Bob, I wanted to move into a different aspect. I'm sure most NASCAR fans know you for breaking news on Twitter. And from your perspective, it's your job to report things on Twitter. But I feel a lot of the times, especially recently, I kind of get the feeling it's like anytime you break something that fans disagree with, I feel like it's kind of like a don't kill the messenger type situation. How do you deal with having to deal with people who almost take it out on you for just breaking news that they don't necessarily like, but it's not you making the calls, you're just bringing the news?
Yeah, well, I mean, I graduated from college in 1991 and it really hasn't changed. Now maybe the feedback is quicker because of social media, but that's like saying, it's like a driver saying, well, I don't want to be asked about being in a wreck. If you're a driver, you're going to be in wrecks, right? If you're a driver who's up front, you're going to be asked about, battling a teammate for a win or how you're racing somebody. It's just the nature of it. And, it's not, it is what, like, if I did not want to be blamed, if I don't want to be blamed for it, then I shouldn't be in the business I am. I mean, that's the way I look at it. It's part of the job, and people are always going to, that's just a normal reaction. And I don't, look, the fact is that if people are reading it and people are passionate about it, that's better for me, because people are going to continue to be reading and continue to be passionate and watching the sport that I write about. So for me, that's the passion is what gets them reading, what gets fans reading in the first place. And you can't, you don't want to take that away.
Yeah, fans definitely have a way of saying things on Twitter, and I don't know if I could be in your job, because I'd want to have some more Bob Pockrass type clapbacks, and I saw one the other day that had me rolling. But another part of your job with the fans are these tweet-ups that you've been doing in a normal world. Obviously can't do them now with the pandemic going on, but kind of like a two-part question. I know you and Jeff Gluck have kind of collaborated on this. Who was the one who came up with the idea for these tweet-ups? And do you have a all-time best tweet-up type story from one of the tracks?
Yeah, so Jeff was really the first one to do it. We both got on Twitter in the spring of 2009, I want to say, spring or summer, and some fans at Richmond are like, hey, Jeff, we'd like to meet you. And so he said, well, hey, how about if you can meet me at this spot outside outside the gate or in the grandstands. I think maybe it's during an Xfinity race, and he just went up and sat with them for a while. And he kind of, and I think that people were doing them in other sports or doing them in other events. And he was like, hey, why don't we, try doing these together? I think NASCAR was trying to figure out ways to engage as well. And so it was really Jeff's idea, and I tagged along and certainly enjoy it. It's a great opportunity for us as reporters to get a good 20 to 30 minutes talking to fans about what they maybe saw yesterday, the day before in a race, or how they feel about certain things going on in the sport. And, certainly you can get some feedback on Twitter, but, being able to, talk face to face with fans is a great thing for us as reporters. So really love doing them and love meeting the fans. The best story has to be, so we were supposed to have Richard Petty at Tweetup, but Richard got sick. So I think he got sick and he wasn't at the Tweetup. And there's a guy who his wife had gotten him into racing, and not his wife, his girlfriend. And so he decided he was going to propose at the Tweetup, and he wanted to do it in front of Richard Petty. But because Richard Petty wasn't there, I was the best alternative. And he said, "Bob, I don't have a question for you." And he got down on one knee and asked his girlfriend with the ring, "I have a question for her," and asked her to marry him. And they don't teach you that in journalism school, how to react to a marriage proposal that happens in front of you. But I think you probably could have picked up my jaw off the ground, because didn't really know what to say, but I was just used as a prop for a marriage proposal. So I think that has to be the best Tweetup story.
Did you tweet about it after the fact? Was it?
I think everybody tweeted, and and they still come to races and come to Tweetups, and it's look, I mean, it's the great thing about NASCAR or about sports in general. People who are fans of certain teams or certain sports, it's an integral part of their lives, and so it's great to be able to have a very, very, very tiny role in how they enjoy the sport.
That's awesome. I was not expecting a proposal thing, but it's pretty cool and definitely an unforgettable experience, I'm sure. So this year we've had a ton of change in the sport. I want to get your perspective on it, but where is the future of NASCAR?
Oh, well, that's a great question. If you could ask me what's the future of the auto industry in 5 years or 10 years, and I probably can't give you that, right? So how do I know where NASCAR is going to go? And I think that's a big question. And NASCAR, the challenge for NASCAR is that while other sports, you grow up and you're somebody in your family is a fan of a certain team, right? And you follow that team, or you follow a certain college, and you kind of get ingrained, and then you maybe go to a certain college and you become a fan of them. And for NASCAR, that used to be, people were Ford people, or people were Chevy people, or people were Dodge people, and your drivers stayed with the same team or you were let's say you were a Childress fan and your driver stayed with that team the entire time, or only switched teams once, and you really could build up a fan base. And your drivers went from your local, if you went to your local short track, the Busch Series would go there and they'd race, and you'd watch your favorite driver race against the stars of the Busch Series, right? And if that driver did well, they would get a Busch Series ride, and you could follow them up. And NASCAR's big challenge is, where do you find that kind of emotional connection now? As far as, people aren't as tied to a car manufacturer as they once were. And, and now drivers are coming, they're driving nationally as teenagers, and don't necessarily connect with their local communities as well as they once did. So I think that's the challenge for NASCAR. Hopefully, obviously the schedule changes, should increase some interest, but I think NASCAR still needs to go deeper and really work at finding ways that make sure that the best talent has a way to get through the system, and for, to be able to really establish connections between drivers and the fans.
Jay, did you have another question?
Yeah, I guess kind of piggybacking off the previous question. I guess in a different sense, this year has been a totally different year for NASCAR, and it's obviously changed your job a lot. What has been some of the biggest challenges for your job this year, as far as, would it be, say, not being able to go to the track, or just, uncertainty? How has it changed your career?
I mean, I would say, not being inside the garage is different, right? Because I would typically would always be in the garage, and you can kind of, sense when people have some downtime and go up and talk to them, and you know that you're not bothering them, at a certain time. If they're just hanging out by the hauler, you would see, this team owner or that team owner, and sometime during a weekend, I'd have a list of people I'd need to contact, and you kind of go through that list and talk to them, kind of you would hope at a somewhat convenient time. And now it's all, you're just texting and calling and emailing and everything, because you're not there. You don't know if you don't want to, bother somebody, but, like if a car is going to the rear of the field, you want to know why, right? And NASCAR doesn't give us, an explanation. So, so that you might be texting a crew chief or a team PR person or a team technical director, just say, hey, what do you know what happened? When before you would just, go up to them in the garage and be like, hey, what happened? And so I think all doing that, and, obviously with all the silly season going on, you would see people and be able to get a good vibe of what was going on. And I think also the fact is that when you're in the garage, you get a lot of feedback. People are either praising you or complaining or something, but you also get a good vibe of, what, how people in the garage feel about certain issues, how they feel about certain changes. And it's a lot more difficult to get that maybe over a text and over an email rather than a face-to-face conversation.
All right, Bob. Well, I really appreciate you coming out. And one of our biggest things that we do on the podcast is at the end of each episode, we give out a hot take for the upcoming weekend, along with the dark horse who could end up winning the race or more likely ends up running well. But I've been asking everyone that we've interviewed this year if they have a dark horse and a hot take for the championship race at Phoenix. And I want to hear from you on who you think could be a dark horse and if you got a hot take.
You mean a hot take as far as who's going to win the championship?
Or just anything. Hot takes come in all shapes and sizes.
Okay, on Phoenix or just in general?
We can go in general.
In general, my hot take would be I understand NASCAR wanting to do only 8 races with practice and qualifying next year, but I would think with the next gen coming in 2022 that I'm biased because I'm somebody who needs content, right, as a journalist, and so I want to see cars on the track. I want to have things to write about. I want to have things to talk to people about, crashes in practice or people struggling in practice or something happening during the week, and you know that you're going to see people around. So I have a huge bias for wanting more practice and qualifying, but I also think it gives people who are struggling just maybe a little bit more time on the track. I think qualifying helps, look at this weekend at the Roval, you have drivers who are 20 points out, and all the playoff drivers are going to start in the same place, right? They're all going to start in the first 6 rows. I want qualifying to be able to determine, where you're going to start and your chances for stage points. So that would be my hot take, that I think, I understand the reasoning and everything, but, I'm biased, but I wish for more practice and qualifying once the next gen car comes. As far as a dark horse for Phoenix, I think, I don't know whether you could call Chase Elliott a dark horse, but he's not Kevin Harvick or Denny Hamlin. And I think that, if he can get to Phoenix, not saying that he will, but if he can get to Phoenix, I'm certainly not going to count him out.
I'd have to agree with you on that one. I'm pretty high on Chase Elliott, and I feel the same way as you. If he can get to Phoenix, however he does it, he's got a pretty good shot to end up stealing the thing from the Hamlin or Harvick. But really appreciate you coming out and joining us for this week. Real quick, I know more than likely 99.9% of our followers follow you, but why don't you just go ahead and give a quick shout out or plug in your social media sites so that way they can get Bob Pockrass information from the source.
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter at Bob Pockrass, BOBPOCKRASS, the same on Instagram. I also have a Facebook page that's Bob Pockrass Fan. So those 3 spots, and then you can also read my stuff on foxsports.com.
All right. Well, Bob, thanks for joining us this week, and hopefully we'll be seeing you a lot more next year, and maybe we'll get you on a Michael Waltrip grid walk as well.
All right. I try to stay away from those. I don't want to get tacos on me.
All right. Thanks,
All right.
Bob.
Thank
It was a
you.
pleasure, man.
Thank you, guys.